guys think? What do you think the lines will be in 2028, 2029? And where do you rank the Bruins in the Atlantic Division and in the Eastern Conference?
You're listening to the PuckUps podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian D. Felice.
Welcome into episode 62 of the PuckUps podcast. I am Brian D. Felice, and thank you all for joining me. On today's show, I want to go over a few fun mailbag questions you sent in over the last few days. But first things first, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And to get in touch with me or be part of the show, you can email me, info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X at BrianDFleece_. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps or leave a comment on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere the show has a social media account and post content. And also, I have updated my website, which you can visit www.thepuckups.com. And it's a one-stop shop for the audio podcast, video podcasts, any blog content, and some future merchandise. So please be sure to check that out. Let's kick things off here with a YouTube question from Southpaw Jimmy, who says, since we all think the future is not now, what are your line predictions for the 28-29 season? By then, all of our top prospects should be Boston bound, and most of the core won't have full no trades anymore. It'd be fun to think where everyone slots in. So good question. It's funny because we don't really know what the lines are going to be for this coming season, let alone a few years from now. But to the point of the question, yes, most of the top prospects, if not all of them, should be in Boston by then. A couple of notables who aren't top prospects but are definitely notable prospects are Cooper Simpson and Niels Bartholdsen, the latter who was drafted this past June. I don't think either of those players will be in the picture at this time. I think Simpson will play a couple of years at North Dakota, which kind of puts his timeline of turning pro around here. But I don't think that he'll be in the Boston lineup necessarily to start this 28-29 season. Probably in Providence. Or maybe, honestly, a junior year at Nodak. But I would imagine he's still in college or just entering the pro ranks and probably down 95 in Providence. And as far as Niels Bartholdsen, by all accounts, people are really high on this kid, third-round pick. But again, at least a couple of years away. He's 18 years old. So I expect by this time, he's in the pro rank conversation in terms of when is he turning pro? Is he ready to turn pro? But there's a difference between turning pro and being a regular in Boston to start this season in question. Okay, so as far as top prospects who should be in Boston by then, obviously James Higgins, who we expect to be in Boston this season. I think Dean Letourneau, after his junior year at BC in the spring of 27, he'll be turning pro. Whether he's in Boston right away or Providence, kind of irrelevant. If we're talking 28-29, he'll be in Boston by then. And I imagine that Dean will probably get a couple of games at the end of the 26-27 season. But if not, he should have a full rookie season in 27-28 to establish himself a little bit by 28-29. So he'll be around. I expect Will Zellers to also be battling for a spot in 27-28 training camp. So theoretically, this should be his second full season in the NHL at this point, I would imagine, if all things go well. So those are the key forwards you're talking about in terms of top prospects: Higgins, Letourneau, and Zellers. And so as far as where do they slot in, well, there's a lot of subjectivity here. And for all we know, by this time, James Higgins is a winger or Dean Letourneau is a winger. For all we know, Pavel Zacha's in Boston. Maybe he's not. Elias Lindholm, his modified trade protection doesn't kick in until the following season. So he still has full trade protection in this 28-29 season. Morgan Geekie still under contract. JJ Peterka still under contract. So is Pastrnak, obviously. Some other notables. I think Mark Kastelik is a UFA heading into this season. So the Bruins will have to make a decision on him by then. Tanner Jeannot is still under contract. I think Donzla Schmelis will potentially need a contract if they want to keep him around. Matt Poitras, is he still in the picture? Casey Middlestad is a UFA to be following this season. So I'm doubtful that he's around in 28, 29, but you never know. So those are just a couple of notes off the top. Minton is an RFA this next summer. Same with Husnudinov. So those guys, the Bruins will probably have them under contract as well. Just some note keeping here on where things might stand by then. As far as combinations, as I said, it depends on where certain guys are. But I feel like the Bruins are hopeful that Hagens and Letourneau end up being long-term centers. So while, yes, one or two of them could shift to the wing and maybe they are wingers, and that would kind of change how I look at the configuration of all of these lines, really, I'm going to go under the assumption that they're centers long-term because that's what the Bruins want them to be. And then as far as external additions, it's so difficult to predict a UFA the Bruins may sign up front or a trade that may happen up front. So I'm going to try to keep this exercise to players who are currently within the organization and what their fates might be by this time, because it's an impossible task to just pick a guy in UFA in a couple of years that might be in this lineup or a trade that might happen. So with these players in mind, by 2028, 2029, and again, I'd be open to different combinations too, but in the spirit of just picking one, I'm kind of going off of ceiling and what the Bruins hope were to happen. So I'll go James Hagens centering JJ Peterka and David Pastrnak. That's your top line in a couple of years from now. Second line, I have Dean Letourneau centering Pavel Zacha on the left and then Morgan Geekie on the right. I think that by this time, hopefully, not because Zacha is incapable of playing center, but hopefully because the Bruins' younger core have matured into those roles, it could force Zacha to the wing. And I think if that's the case, then Bruins fans should be happy. If Zacha's still around, he may not be here, but I feel like the Bruins want to extend him, so I would lean towards him being around, but that could change. But if Zacha has to convert to wing because the young kids stepped up, that's a good problem to have. So you have Letourneau centering Zacha and Morgan Geekie on the right. Third line, I have Fraser Minton centering Will Zellers on the left and Husnudinov on the right. Again, I could see them having an impactful UFA signing up front or a trade. So again, I fully acknowledge these lines aren't going to be exact because there's going to be players that are currently not in the organization now that are in the organization in a couple of years from now. So food for thought there. And just a self-criticism here, I don't love the lack of size on this line of Minton, Zellers, and Husnudinov. I could see those wingers maybe being a little bit small as a unit. So maybe Zacha's on the third line with Minton and Husnudinov, and Zellers is up a line, or maybe Geekie's down a line and Zellers is up. I don't really know, but you could balance things out. And then your fourth line, I don't think Sean Corrali's around anymore. Obviously, neither is Mikey Eyssimont. I don't think Alex Steves will be around much longer at this point. I think maybe you're talking about Don Zlashmela centering Tanner Jeannot, who's still under contract, and then Mark Kaslick on the right, who would need a new contract, or they let him walk, and Elias Lindholm, who you still can't move, and maybe he's not on LTIR, and he has to be around, and he's not bought out. In those situations, maybe he's your fourth line left right wing in 2 years from now. So again, I acknowledge there's a million moving pieces here. It's a really difficult challenge to put together exact lines for 2 full seasons from now. But again, I think generally speaking, maybe something along these lines. But if Hagens is a winger and Letourneau is your top center, and then Zacha's your second line center, or Minton's your second line center, and Zacha's your third line, there's so many different combinations. Also, where's Matt Patra? I struggle to see Matt Patra being in Boston long term at the center ice position, because I don't know if he's a player that converts well to wing. And the reality is, if he's behind Hagens and Letourneau and Minton and Zacha, I just don't see where Matt Patra fits in long term at center ice. Even if Hagens ends up being a winger or Letourneau ends up being a winger, you still have to battle Minton and one of Hagens or Letourneau. and Zaka. So it's an uphill battle for Potter long term. And again, he's still without a contract right now. So it's hard for me to pencil him in for over 2 years from now when I don't know what his future is this coming season with the Bruins. And then on the back end, Charlie McAvoy on the right side still. I think Will Borgen is probably your third pair right shot defenseman. Your second pair right shot defenseman is probably somebody that they acquire via UFA or trade. Again, I'm not going to name a name, but it's probably somebody who's not currently in an organization. I think Frederick Brunet is on your left side. I think Nikita Zadorov is on your left side still, unless he's traded. Hampus Lindholm, he's still on your left side. Is he traded, though? I feel like one of Zadorov or Lindholm will probably be traded by 28, 29, but I could be wrong about that. Based on their contracts, they're still here. I think Brunet's still there. I think Elliot Gronwald is a prospect who a couple of years from now should be battling for bottom pair minutes. Where's Mason Lohrei? Is he still in Boston this year? I don't know. Same with Henry Jokiharju. Connor Clifton won't be around by then, I don't think. Jonathan Aspro, he'll be up for a new deal at that point. I think he's going to be UFA that summer. Do they let him walk and get a payday somewhere? Do they bring him back on a cheaper deal? I don't know. So it's hard, but there's a lot up in the air with this Bruins team over the next few years. That's for damn sure. So, and if the Bruins have a bad year this year and their top players start asking for trades, oh boy, this roster can look much different by 28, 29. So, fun question. Let me know what you guys think that your line combinations would be in the 28, 29 season. All right, and then we'll finish off quickly here with a question from Jason Burke on YouTube, who says, where would you rank the Bruins in the Atlantic Division or even the Eastern Conference in general? And this is a tough conversation because I really do think that the Atlantic Division, top to bottom, is the best division in hockey. I'm pretty sure last year, 5 of the top 10 teams in the NHL, maybe even 6. No, 5. 5. I think 5 were in the Atlantic Division, not 6. You had Montreal, Buffalo, Tampa, Boston. Those 4 certainly were top 10 teams in the NHL last year. And then Ottawa, I'm trying to remember if they were in the top 10 or maybe just outside. But either way, that's crazy, crazy depth in that division. No, by the way, who did I not mention? Oh, yeah, the Florida Panthers, who went to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. And last year was pretty much a scheduled loss for them, let's be honest. Between all the hockey that they've played in recent years and some of the injuries that they had to deal with, especially Alex Barkov all season long, who didn't play a single game. That was a scheduled loss for them last year. And then Toronto. Say what you want about Toronto. I know Bruins fans love shitting on the Maple Leafs, and hey, I'm not afraid to do so either. But the reality is, prior to last year, the Maple Leafs had like a decade-long playoff streak going. Now, when they hit the playoffs, it was a bit of a different story, different struggle. But in the regular season, Toronto, outside of last year, they've been a pretty consistent team. So they'll be back in the fold next year. They're hoping they are. Florida will absolutely be back in the fold next year. So, it's interesting because when we do this exercise, predicting a team in a power ranking in the Atlantic Division being 6th or 7th or 5th or 6th or 7th, it might sound like an insult, but it's really not, because it's such a tough division. Last year, the Bruins finished 4th in the Atlantic. They would have finished 1st in the Pacific, 2nd in the Metro, and I want to say, 4th in the Central. So 2 of the 4 divisions in hockey last year, the Bruins would have finished 4th, which they did in one of them, or 2nd or 1st. That's just, it's a tough division. So with that said, right now in the Atlantic, my power rankings are heading into next year. Florida number 1 for the obvious. I just think that they would have been the best team in the Eastern Conference last year on paper if they were healthy still. I don't look at last year as indicative of who they are going forward. It's their time still. And they have their questions. Sergei Bobrovsky's gone and Jacob Markstrom is in. Obviously, Bobrovsky didn't have a great year last year, but again, that Panthers team, it was a scheduled loss. So they do have their questions, but they are overwhelmingly the favorite to win this division still. Up next, I have Montreal at 2nd, and the Habs, I don't need to say much on them. They're just a good up-and-coming team, a lot of speed, a lot of skill, and, winning a couple of rounds in the playoffs last year, like they absolutely deserve to be a top 3 team in the power rankings here. And then Tampa Bay, I have 3rd, and Tampa, listen, I think that they have their own question marks long-term. I think that they're a regression candidate, but I still think that because the division behind them is such a wild card and they have so much inconsistencies, I have to give Tampa Bay the benefit of the doubt here. And at least in a preseason ranking, have them as a top 3 team. You still have Kucherov, who I think is one of the best players in all of hockey, regardless of position, but he's certainly the best winger in hockey. You have Jake Gensel, Braden Point, who's not who he used to be, granted, but he's still a good player. Anthony Cirelli, so they have some good firepower up front. Victor Hedman, not the player he used to be, but still an accountable guy back there. I think John Carlson will help out the blue line, help mitigate the loss of Darren Radish from an offensive production perspective. And Vasilevsky is still Vasilevsky. I also like John Cooper as a coach. And Tampa Bay, they have a winning system. Like, they have a winning culture, and I just don't think that that's something to gloss over. We've seen it here in Boston with teams like the Patriots, hell, even the Bruins. Like, there are certain teams where, at least in the regular season, like, that you know that they're going to be a competitive team and bring a lot to the table, and they know how to play the right way for the most part. So again, would I be surprised if Tampa was a wild card team or maybe even miss the playoffs next year? Not entirely, because I do think that they're kind of over depending on an aging core, but still elite at many spots. But they could miss the playoffs. They could be a wild card team. They could be a top 3 team. A lot of these teams in the Atlantic, they could finish in a lot of different places, and I wouldn't be surprised either way. But 4th place, I do have Buffalo. I think the Sabres got worse over the offseason on paper. You lose Bowen Byram, you lose Alex Tuck. You bring in Olin Zellweger, who's a good player. Maybe that mitigates the Byram loss. And I know that the Sabres are counting on their younger core to step up and by committee just kind of like take over the responsibilities and the production that Alex Tuck gave them, which, is fair. If they believe in their young core that they can step up, that's great. But on paper, they have gotten worse this offseason. Still, they beat the Bruins last year in the playoffs. They won the division, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did it again. I wouldn't be surprised if they finished 5th or 6th. Like, I don't think Buffalo is going to finish 7th or 8th, but I definitely think that they could finish in any of the first 5 spots. So I'll put them 4th right now in a wild card spot, and I do think they'll make the playoffs. I have the Bruins 5th, and say what you want about the Bruins, but again, outside of 2 years ago, they're a consistent team, at least in the regular season. Like, they know how to respect the game for the most part. They have good players at each position. David Pastrnak is the 2nd best winger in hockey, one of the best 10 to 12 players in all of hockey, if not a little bit higher. Charlie McAvoy is one of the best top 15 defensemen in the world. Jeremy Swayman, one of the best 5 goalies in the world, I think. So at each position, you have a really good player, right? And then the question for the Bruins is, those players are either surrounded by unproven talent to no fault of their own because they're young, or underwhelming talent a little bit. So you know who Pastrnak is, you know who Swayman can be, who McAvoy should be. But if Zacha and Geeky and Hampus Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov and JJ Peterka, who's a big addition, if those guys can step up, if the young players like Fraser Minton and James Higgins and Husnudinov, if those players can step up, a young player like a Frederick Brunet, maybe, like, I do think the Bruins have a good fabric in place. I think that they're underwhelming in terms of are they a contender or not, because I don't think they are. But are they a competitive team? Yes. Could they finish as low as 7th or 8th in the division? Sure. If things go bad, sure. Could they finish as high as 4th or 5th, maybe even 3rd if things go really well? Yeah. Like, the Bruins, to me, no different than some other teams in this division. They could finish one of 4 or 5 spots. So I have Boston 5th. Toronto, I have 6th. Again, talk about the wild card of all wild cards. I think the Maple Leafs, they've been a consistent playoff team for a decade. They lost Mitch Marner last year to Vegas. They had some injuries, and, they shit the bed. They had a very bad year. I think, though, you still have Austin Matthews, John Tavares, Matthew Nyes, William Nylander, a good young player in Easton Cowan up front. You bring in Gavin McKenna, not to put too much pressure on him in his rookie year, but he could have a pretty good impact potentially. On the back end, don't love Morgan Riley. I do like Chris Tanev. Don't love his availability. I like Ekman Larson. I like Darren Radish. I think he'll come in and help their power play. So there's a lot to like there with Toronto. Bobrovsky should help them in goal. But again, they have a lot of questions, and I think they could also finish a wild card team or a playoff team or towards the bottom of the division. And then I have Ottawa. I have Ottawa beneath them. I think Ottawa, analytically, they're a good team. They generate a lot of chances. They don't give up a ton. They're disciplined. But I have to question the Brady Tkachuk departure. They could be better off for it, but they have question marks there. I have to question, are they a stable team? There's been a lot of shit going on in that locker room for a couple of years now. Linus Ullmark, good goalie, but he's dealing with a lot of stuff off the ice. So I have to question, their stability in goal at times. And they could be better off without Brady Tkachuk, but I have to see it. So there's a lot to like in Ottawa, but again, it's a tough division. I think 6 or 7 of the teams in the Atlantic would be playoff teams in most of the other divisions. So it's a tough conversation. And then I have Detroit finishing 8th. And again, they have some good pieces, but you have your captain asking for a trade. There's a lot going on with Detroit right now, and not a lot to love, to be honest. As far as where the Bruins finished in the division, well, if I have them finishing 5th in the where the Bruins finish in the conference, if I have them finishing 5th in the division, I'll have them finishing 7th or 8th in the conference. I think the only 2 teams in the Metro right now that I would put above the Bruins emphatically would be Carolina, obviously, and Washington. I think Washington's had one of the best off seasons of the NHL so far. And in Ovechkin's final year, it seems like, could there be a bit of a swan song for him? And I think the Caps will bounce back and rally behind that. And they brought in some good talent, Jordan Kyrou, Alex Tuck, among others. So I would put them ahead of the Bruins right now. And yeah, I have the Bruins as a bubble team, essentially. And they could be better. They could be worse. I think we all kind of feel the same way. So let me know what you guys think. What do you think the lines will be in 2028, 2029? And where do you rank the Bruins in the Atlantic Division and in the Eastern Conference? Thank you all very much for listening. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you next week.